there is a gate. It is small, made of wrought iron, and set into a brick archway. Above it, welded in cold, industrial sans serif letters, is a phrase that the world now knows by heart.
Arbeit macht frei.
Work sets you free. For decades, we have looked at that gate and called it a lie. We assumed it was just a cruel deception, a final mockery before the end. But it wasn't just a lie. It was the first cog in a machine designed to do something far worse than kill. If you want to understand this place, you have to stop looking at it as a prison. A prison is designed to keep people in. This place was designed to break people down. It was a laboratory of the human spirit, engineered by psychologists, architects, and bureaucrats who asked a terrifying question. How much can you take away from a human being before they cease to be human? They didn't just build a camp, they built a psychological thresher. From the moment the train wheels screeched to a halt, every step, every rule, every shout, and every silence was calculated. It was a blueprint not for mass murder, but for mass dehumanization. This is how they engineered the death of the soul long before the death of the body. The engineering begins in the dark. It begins in a cattle car, sealed tight, moving across the Polish countryside. The designers knew that fear is effective, but exhaustion is better. If you want to process thousands of people without a riot, you must first drain them of the will to resist. For days, there is no food, no water, no sanitation. The air in the car turns poisonous. The crushing lack of space forces people to stand until their legs give out, and then they lie on top of one another. By the time the train slows down, the people inside are no longer individuals. They are a collective of trauma. They are confused, dehydrated, and desperate for fresh air. And then, the sudden shock. The doors are not opened. They are thrown wide. The silence of the countryside is shattered by barking dogs, shouting voices, and blinding spotlights. This is the shock and awe of the intake process. It is designed to overwhelm the senses. If you were there, you wouldn't have time to think. And that was the point. The system was designed to remove the interval between stimulus and response. You are shouted at, you move. You are struck, you run. You are separated, you cry out. But the sound is swallowed by the cacophony. They called this the ramp. To the SS, it was a filtration system. To the arrivals, it was the moment their reality fractured. Notice the specific engineering of the selection. It wasn't done in a courtroom or an office. It was done in seconds, with a flick of a thumb. Left or right. Life or death. Why so fast? Because speed prevents comprehension. If a mother has time to understand that going left means she will never see her child again, she will fight. She will scratch and scream and tear at the guards. But if she is told, hand the child to the grandmother, you will see them after the showers, she complies. Hope was weaponized. The design used your own rationality against you. A rational person thinks, they wouldn't bring us all this way just to kill us. They need workers. This is just a transition. The Nazis relied on that logic. They used your own survival instinct to walk you calmly into the grave. Once the selection is over, the real engineering begins. Those who survived the thumb flick, the lucky ones, are marched into a building called the sauna. It sounds benign, but inside, the architecture is designed to strip away every layer of civilization you possess. Think about what makes you you. Your name, your profession, your clothes, the hair on your head, the wedding ring on your finger, the photo of your wife in your pocket. In the span of 1 hour, the system systematically removes them all. First, the undressing. In normal society, nakedness is private. Here, it is public. mass and forced. It is the first great equalizer. A banker looks the same as a laborer when he is naked and shivering. The social hierarchy of the outside world is instantly erased. Then the shearing. The barbers, prisoners themselves, forced to work, shave the hair from your head, your arms, your groin. This isn't just about lice though, that was the excuse. This is about identity. Hair is expression. It is distinct. When you look in the mirror after the shearing, you don't recognize the face staring back. You look like everyone else. You are becoming a clone. And then, the ultimate act of branding. The tattoo. Historically, we brand cattle. We brand property. We do not brand people. The Nazis knew this. They introduced the tattoo not just for identification. Paper records would have sufficed, but for psychological domination. When the needle pierces your left forearm, it hurts, it bleeds, but the pain is secondary. The message is primary. You do not have a name anymore. You are number 174,517. Your past is gone. Your achievements are deleted. You are an inventory item in the catalogue of the Third Reich. The genius of this evil design was that it forced you to participate in it. You had to memorize the number. You had to answer to it. If you forgot it, you were beaten. If you stumbled over the German pronunciation, you were beaten. You were forced to verbally affirm your own dehumanization every single day. Now you are processed. You are marched to the barracks. And here, you encounter the architectural hostility of the camp. The barracks were not built to house people. They were built to warehouse bodies. The bunks were triple-tiered wooden shelves. If you were on the bottom, you slept in the mud. If you were on the middle, you were crushed. If you were on top, you froze. But look closer at the design of the daily routine. The schedule was engineered to induce a state of chronic, low-level terror. Consider the appel, the roll call. Every morning and every evening, thousands of prisoners were forced to stand in perfect rows. They stood for hours, sometimes 4, sometimes 10, in the rain, in the snow, in the blistering heat. Why? It wasn't to count. They knew how many people they had. It was an exercise in meaningless suffering. The design of the appel was to break the concept of time. In the outside world, you wait for a reason. You wait for a bus. You wait for a meeting. Here, you waited for nothing. You waited because they told you to wait. If you moved, you were shot. If you collapsed, you were beaten. This is psychological engineering called learned helplessness. When a subject learns that their actions have no effect on the outcome, that standing still or moving, speaking or staying silent, all leads to pain, they stop trying. They become passive. They regress. The camp was designed to turn adults into frightened children. You had to ask permission to use the latrine. You had to run when shouted at. You were fed a slurry that barely qualified as food, forcing you to lick the bowl like an animal. This wasn't accidental cruelty. It was systemic regression. By reducing a doctor or a lawyer to a starving creature fighting over a potato peel, the Nazis validated their own ideology. They looked at the prisoners and said, "Look at them, they are animals." They engineered the conditions to make their lies come true. The most insidious part of the design, however, was not what the guards did to the prisoners. It was what the system forced the prisoners to do to each other. The SS did not run the camp alone. They couldn't. There were too few of them. So they designed a hierarchy of complicity. They created the capos. A capo was a prisoner given authority over other prisoners. They were given a whip. They were given extra soup. They were given better boots. In exchange, they had to keep order. They had to deliver the beatings. Imagine the psychological brilliance of this evil. The SS could stand back and watch. They outsourced the violence. They turned the victims into the victimizers. If you are a starving prisoner and you are offered a chance to survive, to eat, to sleep in a warm room, all you have to do is hit your fellow prisoner. Do you do it? The system bets that you will. Primo Levi, a survivor, called this the grey zone. It was a moral dead space where the line between good and evil was blurred by the desperate need to survive. The system was designed to corrupt you. It wanted you to compromise your morals. Because once you have compromised, once you have stolen bread from a dying man, or pushed a weaker man into the mud to save yourself, you have lost your spiritual resistance. You are broken. And at the very bottom of this hellish hierarchy were the Sonderkommando. These were the men chosen to work in the crematoria. The design here is almost too painful to speak of. The Nazis did not want to drag the bodies out of the gas chambers. It was messy. It was traumatizing even for the killers. So they forced the victims to do it. Jewish men were forced to usher their own people into the chambers. They were forced to lie to them, to tell them it was just a shower. They were forced to listen to the screams as the doors were locked. And then they were forced to enter the silence, disentangle the bodies, extract the gold teeth, and feed the ovens. This was the ultimate triumph of the evil design. They made the victims turn the wheel of their own extermination. They inflicted a guilt so profound that many Sonderkommando men committed suicide, unable to live with what the engineering of the camp had forced them to become. While this horror churned in the mud, the camp maintained a grotesque veneer of civilization. This, too, was part of the design. There was an orchestra. Just past the gate, near the kitchen, a group of prisoners sat with violins, flutes, and accordions. They played distinct, cheerful marching music as the work commandos marched out to the slave labor sites in the morning, and they played again as the exhausted, carrying the dead, marched back at night. Why music? Was it for the guards? Partially. But it was also a psychological weapon. Music implies culture. It implies order. It implies that what is happening is normal. To hear Mozart or upbeat marches in the middle of hell creates a cognitive dissonance that shatters the mind. It makes the horror feel surreal, like a nightmare you can't wake up from. It also served a rhythmic purpose. The beat of the music forced the prisoners to march in step. It turned the chaotic mass of suffering individuals into a single robotic column. It enforced discipline even in exhaustion. It was the metronome of the death factory. And then there was the hospital, the Revier. In any other place on Earth, a hospital is a place of healing. In the engineering of Auschwitz, the hospital was a waiting room for death. The doctors there, men like Joseph Mengele, did not treat patients. They studied them. The design of the medical block was the ultimate perversion of science. Here, the engineering became literal. They treated the prisoners not as humans, but as biological material. They were fascinated by twins, by dwarfs, by eye color. They measured, they injected, they cut. They approached the destruction of a human being with the same cold, detached curiosity that a botanist looks at a leaf. This detachment was necessary for the system to function. If you see a human, you cannot kill them. If you see a specimen, you can do anything. Eventually, the design reaches its conclusion. The prisoner has been stripped, numbered, starved, worked, broken, and used. They have nothing left to give. The Musselman. This was the camp slang for the prisoners who had reached the end. The ones who had stopped caring. The ones who sat in the dirt, staring at nothing, rocking back and forth. They had checked out. The biological machine was still ticking, but the light behind the eyes was gone. The system had succeeded. It had hollowed them out. At this point, the physical extermination, the gas chamber, was merely a formality. The person was already dead. The engineering had done its job. The gas chambers themselves were designed with the same terrifying logic. They were often disguised. They had flower beds planted out front. They had curtains painted on the windows. Why? To the very end, the system wanted to deny you the dignity of knowing you were dying. It wanted to trick you. It wanted to keep you docile. It wanted to process you efficiently. Even in death, you were not allowed a moment of truth. You were herded into a room, told to breathe deeply to disinfect yourself, and then extinguished with a candle. We look back at Auschwitz today, at the rusting barbed wire and the crumbling bricks, and we ask, how? How could humans do this to other humans? The answer lies in the engineering. It happened because they didn't see it as doing it to humans. They built a system that put distance between the killer and the killed. The bureaucrat who signed the train order never saw the cattle car. The architect who designed the gas chamber never heard the scream. The guard who dropped the pellets stood on the roof, separated by concrete. The Sonderkommando who moved the bodies was forced to do so to survive. Every step of the way, the design diffused the responsibility. It chopped the act of murder into 10,000 tiny administrative tasks. This is the true horror of the evil design. It wasn't built by madmen. It was built by accountants, by engineers, by doctors, by men who prided themselves on efficiency and order. They proved that you can use the tools of civilization, organization, technology, psychology, to dismantle civilization itself. They proved that if you design the system carefully enough, you can make ordinary men participate in the greatest crime in history just by doing their jobs. The gate still stands there today. Arbeit macht frei. It remains a warning, not just of hatred, but of the cold, mechanical indifference that can be engineered into the heart of a society. The machine is broken now. The fires are out. But the blueprints of how to break a human soul, those still exist, and we must never forget how easily they can be used again.